Hello everyone, welcome to Study IQ. In this video, I will be discussing the Crimean crisis of 2014 and the subsequent Russian military intervention in Ukraine, also in 2014. My name is Dr. Mahipal Singh Rathod and I am a faculty for General Studies at Study IQ. Our pen drive courses are now available for CDS, CLAT and KVS examinations as well. If you want discounts of 30% which is starting today, please go visit the website or you can call on this number to order. Now let me begin with telling you the geography of the area about which we will be talking, that is Crimea and Ukraine. So this is a map of Europe and this is Ukraine. Ukraine is the largest country area wise in Europe if you keep aside Russia obviously. So it is the largest country. It is a huge producer of grains, wheat especially. It is one of the largest exporters of wheat in the world. If we zoom in a little bit, this is a map of Ukraine in which you can clearly see the area called Crimea. So it is situated in the south of the country. It is a little bit separate. You can see it is a bit separate from the country, but still it is connected to Ukraine. It is not connected to Russia here. There is sea in between. So this is Black Sea. Crimea is situated along Black Sea. And what is the name of this small sea? It is called the Sea of Azov. Very important. And there is a small water body connecting the Sea of Azov to the Black Sea. It is called Kerch Strait or the Straits of Kerch. Please remember this name, Kerch Strait. If we move on to the map of Crimea, you can see here clearly this is the Kerch Strait. You can see here, and there is no direct land connectivity with Russia, but Crimea is connected to Ukraine, the mainland Ukraine, via land, and you can see here roads running through. Also, mainly the electricity and the water supply of Crimea come from Ukraine. So what happened in 2014 was that after a referendum, Russia annexed Crimean Peninsula. There is a little controversy over the word of use of the word annexed. Russia says it did not annex. Crimean people said that we want to join Russia, but the entire world, most of the world thinks that Russia annexed Crimean Peninsula. After that, the southern and eastern regions of Ukraine also declared independence, and some militias supported by Russian military are fighting the Ukrainian army since. Militia means an army which is not an regular army. It is people who have been trained with weapons and who are fighting with weapons, but they are not regular soldiers. They are called militias. So the militias are local people, but they are supported by Russian military. So these are the two important events. Now we will talk about how these happened and what were the reasons. So like every time we have to go into the historical background of the situation. So Ukraine was under the control of Russian Empire for almost 400 years, and Crimea earlier was under the control of Ottomans, the Ottoman Empire, which was situated mainly in Turkey. So Crimea went from Ottoman control to Russia in 1783. After a war, when peace was signed, it was given over to the Russian Empire. After that, it was under the control of Russia. There was also a very important war fought in 1853 to 56. It is called the Crimean War. It was fought between Russia on one side, Russian Empire, and on the other hand, the three great empires of the world, the Ottoman Empire, the French Empire, and the British Empire. The war was fought mainly to check the aggression of Russia so that Russia does not become powerful in the Balkans and its aggression is stopped. Russia was defeated in Crimean War. After that, we have the Russian Revolution of 1917, after which Crimea became a part of USSR. In 1924, Stalin came to power in USSR, and his policies led to the death of almost 7.5 million. This is around 75 lakh Ukrainians. It is a huge number, and it was an artificial famine because he did not let the farmers eat their own produce. He forcibly exported the wheat from the grain producing areas of Ukraine to other parts of Russia, and there was a huge famine and it killed almost 1 crore Ukrainians. Some estimates say that the number of death was around 1 crore. Some others say that it was anywhere between 30 lakh to 1 crore. Also, after World War II, he entirely deported the population of Crimean Tatars. Crimean Tatars were 35% of the population of the region of Crimea. They were an ethnic tribe, they were ethnic people, they were the descendants of Mongols, and they were transported entirely from Crimea to the area of Uzbekistan because Stalin suspected that they had supported Nazis during the World War II, these Crimean Tatars. On the other hand, ethnically Russian people were moved into Crimea. He wanted that Crimea should be populated by Russian speaking and ethnically Russian people. So 35% of the population was removed and Russians moved into Crimea. Now, up until 1954, Crimea was part of Russian Soviet Socialist Republic. But in 1954, Nikita Khrushchev, the leader of USSR, he transferred the region from Russia to the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. You must remember now that USSR comprised of 15 different Soviet Socialist republics. If you do not know about this, please kindly watch my video on the disintegration of USSR. You will understand what I am talking about. So in 1991, when USSR collapsed, all these regions, they became independent countries, the 15 independent countries, and at that time Ukraine also gained its independence. But when Ukraine gained its independence, Crimea asked that we will remain autonomous. So this autonomy was given to Crimea. It has its own different parliament and it has its own prime minister, but all the other matters like foreign policy, international relations are under the control of Ukraine. But Crimea was an autonomous region. You have to remember that. It is very important. Now I will talk about the political upheavals that led to the Crimean crisis. So in 2010, Viktor Yanukovych was elected as the president of Ukraine, and he has been close to Russia. He has close ties to Russian people, Vladimir Putin, and he is a supporter. He is a supporter of the philosophy that Ukraine should have close ties to Russia, its motherland, the old tie-up of USSR. We should be close to them and not the European Union. So in 2013, Ukraine was on the last step to sign a treaty with European Union, and it was the first step in which Ukraine would have joined EU after some years. But this treaty was rejected at the last minute by Viktor Yanukovych, and on the other hand, he signed an agreement and a multi-billion-dollar bailout with Russia. The bailout was because Ukrainian economy was going in a very poor phase and they needed money. So instead of getting that money from EU, he got that money from Russia. So this led to huge protests against Viktor Yanukovych. The opposition parties as well as common people protested on a ground called Euromaidan. So they were called the Euromaidan. It was the name of the place. So Euromaidan protests erupted. This all was in November of 2013. You can see here the Euromaidan protests. So these protests carried on till February. On February 20th, what happens is there is a huge crackdown by the government. Even earlier, Viktor Yanukovych was using the army to demonstrate against the protesters, and one by one they were suffering. But on February 20th, many protesters were killed. Snipers were put up on buildings, and the protesters were shot at by military personnel. So around 40 people died that day. So these protests got very violent, and on February 21st, Yanukovych disappeared. He left the country and he went to Russia. At this time, the protesters, they set up an interim government. The opposition party, the opposition member of parliament, they all supported in this, and an interim government was formed, and it signed an agreement with European Union that it was a peace agreement basically, which said that now there will be peace in Ukraine and the protests will stop, and we will sign a deal with European Union sooner or later, and elections will be held within the next 6 months. But Putin says that it was an illegal coup by protesters who threw away an elected head of state, because Yanukovych was elected in the 2010 elections democratically. So Putin said that it is illegal. But the protesters said that since he was using very harsh tactics against us, he was using the military to clamp down on peaceful protesters. Initially, the protests were peaceful, but as and when the military started cracking down, the protests also became violent. Soon after this, the Crimean crisis started. So, within days of Yanukovych's leaving, Russian backed protesters occupied parliament in Crimea, in Simferopol, which is the capital of Crimea. You do not need to remember that. So, as I told you earlier, Crimea was autonomous since 1991. It had its own parliament and prime minister. So, some protesters who were wearing masks, they came and protested outside the Crimean parliament, and they kept the parliament as hostage. So the old prime minister was removed and a new prime minister was appointed who was in favor of Russia. Now, this new prime minister asked Russia and Vladimir Putin for assistance in maintaining peace and security. The reason I will tell you later. One of the big reasons for this was that Crimea is ethnically Russian now. Majority of the population, around 75% of the people in Crimea, identify themselves as Russians. They speak the Russian language, and that is why they have very close affinity for Russia. They have very close relations. They have a place in their heart for Russia and not just Ukraine. So when this Viktor Yanukovych was removed, they protested, and also these protesters were helped by Russia. Now, what Russia did was it sent its army without any insignia or without any markings to prove that they were Russian soldiers, and all these soldiers occupied important parliament buildings, the army bases, the airports, the railway stations. All these important buildings were occupied. So these soldiers were masked. They are also sometimes called the little green masked soldiers because they were all wearing green colored uniforms and they had no insignia. Insignia means the signs which lead you to identify that this soldier is of so and so country or so and so battalion, etc. So they did not have any insignia, and they all came in within 2 to 3 days, and they took over the airports, military bases, and other strategic locations. As soon as this happened, the Ukrainian army, which was there at in its military bases, they were held hostage. They were kept inside the military bases only. Now, this new prime minister of Crimea, he called for a referendum so that the Crimean people can decide whether we want to join Russia or we want independence, that is complete independence, neither Ukraine nor Russia. There was no option given in this referendum for joining Ukraine again. So this referendum took place on March 16. You can see how fast things are moving. On 25th and 26th of February, these soldiers had started moving in, and within 20 days this referendum was held, and this referendum had 83% people coming to vote and 96.7% voted in favor of joining the Russian Federation. But because no international observers were allowed, that is why this referendum is sometimes not given credence by the international community. They say it is a fraud. In fact, some Russian media has been saying that only 30% people voted in favor of joining, and this 96% was a fabricated lie. Whatever be the case, on March 18, Crimea joins Russia. A treaty was signed by the Prime Minister of Crimea and the Prime Minister and the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin. So in Kremlin on March 18, Crimea joined Russia again. What happened right after this was that US, UK and many other NATO countries, they levied economic sanctions on Russia. It means that they put on restrictions on the Russian trade so that companies from USA cannot trade in Russia. Russian leaders, Russian parliamentarians, they were put under sanctions. They could not travel to UK, US and many other countries, and they could not do business dealings. Their accounts were frozen, their bank accounts were all frozen, especially many of the top Russian ministers. All their accounts in the New York and Washington banks were frozen. So many sanctions were put upon, and the Russian economy is still reeling under these sanctions. It has been 2 years, and these sanctions have really crippled the Russian economy because many gas and natural gas and oil signing agreements that had been signed are not coming through. And Russia is a big producer of natural gas and oil. Also, the G8, the group of 8 countries, they expelled Russia, and so now the G8 became G7. Russia was removed from G8. Also during the G20 summit, Putin left suddenly because everyone started telling him that you have not done the right thing in Crimea, and Putin left in anger in the G20 summit. But Russia is still a member of G20. Soon after the Crimean annexation, the separatist and pro-Russian protests started in eastern Ukraine as well, because even eastern Ukraine is ethnically Russian. They erupted in eastern and southern regions of Ukraine. These are the Luhansk region, the Donetsk region, the Kharkiv and Odessa. If you look at this map shows the red colored area which have many speakers of Russian language. So this is Russia, you can see here. So this is the border of Ukraine with Russia, and in this border areas, most of these regions, they have people speaking Russian language and they identify themselves as ethnically Russians. But please do not think that they want to join Russia at all cost. The fact is, they want that Russian should be recognized as a second language in Ukraine. On the interim government which was formed after Yanukovych's removal, they said that Ukraine will have only one language. Ukrainian Russian was removed as the secondary language, and this is what angered many of the people in these areas, because they want Russian to be a official language as well. And also they want that even though we are a separate country, we should have close ties with Russia, because Russia is our motherland. Originally we were all together. Why should we have closer ties to EU, European Union? On the other hand, the people living in these orange colored areas, they are ethnically Ukrainian. They speak the Ukrainian language, and they say that we should have closer ties with EU because European Union is more progressive, it has more money, and it is more better for us and the future of the country if we have closer ties to European Union rather than Russia. We should sell our natural gas, we should buy natural gas from EU, we should export more to EU, and we should also adopt the euro. In fact, in 2013, the agreement was basically a first step to join the European Union, but Yanukovych did not sign it. So this is the basic divide in this country. You have to understand this, because this is the basic reason for all the problems in Ukraine right now. This is the ethnic problem. It is an ethnic problem. It is not just because Russia wants to take over this territory. No, it is because the people here want some autonomy. There is also a demand for autonomy in these regions. See, this is the Luhansk region. This is Luhansk. This is Donetsk, and this is Kharkiv. So all these areas, they want some autonomy, some amount of autonomy like Crimea had. Even Crimea, you can see here, it is the most red colored, maroon colored area. So here it's more than 75% people, they speak Russian. So in Ukraine, this is the divide, and this is the area of Odessa. Here also there were some demands of joining here there were some demands of keeping Russia as the second language. And another reason for the protest was the new government that came in, that was very right wing. It was it comprised of right wing members, and these right wing members are against Russian language, against Russian ethnicity, and they oppose any kind of Russian influence in Ukraine. So this is why there was protest, and these protests again were helped by Russia. This is another map here. This is the map of 2010 election, and you can see that all the Russian speaking regions, they voted for Viktor Yanukovych, who was more closer to Russia, who was supposed to be more closer to Russia. And the blue areas, which are ethnically Ukrainian and they speak the Ukrainian language, they voted for Tymoshenko, the other contestant for the post of president. She was the one who led the Euromaidan protest, and she was later jailed by Viktor Yanukovych. So this is the basic divide in the country. Now, right after this Crimean crisis, from March to August, there was fighting going on between the Ukrainian government forces and the militias in eastern Ukraine. These militias were aided by the Russian army. These Russian army, again, just like Crimea, they came in without any official sign, without any official battalion numbers on their tanks, on their trucks. All the number plates were removed, and also the Russian military officers who were caught by the Ukrainian government, they said that we are on a holiday. They said that we have left the Russian army and we are spending our holidays fighting here in Ukraine. And such kind of tactics were used by Russia to support these militias. And this fighting went on very fiercely till August, and in September, a ceasefire was signed between Petro Poroshenko, the newly elected Ukrainian president. He was elected in June. And on the other hand, there was Russia and the Eastern republics. Now, these two regions of Luhansk and Donetsk had declared themselves as independent republics. So, these republics, Eastern republics, I will call them, and Ukraine and Russia, they signed a ceasefire agreement in Minsk. And this is also called as Minsk 1 agreement. So this was in September of 2014. But after this agreement also, fighting did not stop. Areas now are most of the areas of Luhansk and Donetsk are controlled by these independent militias, these independent republics. They are not under the control of Ukrainian government. Even today, the condition is going on similarly. The fighting, although it has reduced, but the Minsk 2 agreement was signed in 2015, February 2015. That has also failed because fighting still continued after that. Now, in September 2016, another third agreement has been signed. Let's see whether it holds up. Till now, it is holding up, but let's see how it holds up in the future. Now, why is Russia so interested in Crimea? You must ask this question. The first reason is the strategic location of Crimea. It has historically been a point of contention, a point of war between different empires. The reason is it gives access to Black Sea, Mediterranean Sea, and Balkans, and you can go from the you can go from the Crimean ports using your ship to anywhere from Black Sea till Mediterranean to Atlantic Ocean, wherever you want. Secondly, the Black Sea Fleet of the Russian Navy has always been situated in Crimea at Sevastopol. Now, what is this Black Sea Fleet? This is one of the largest wings of the Russian Navy, and it was always at Sevastopol. So, after 1991, when Ukraine took control of Crimea, Russia had an agreement with Ukraine that they had leased out these shipyards. It means they had rented out these shipyards so that they could operate their navy from Sevastopol. But Ukraine in 2013, it said that after 2017 and 18, we will not give you any more time. You have to remove your Black Sea Fleet from our country, our areas. So this was not acceptable to Russia because Sevastopol is one of the only warm water ports that Russia has access to. All the northern ports of Russia, they freeze in the winters, and so the ships cannot come and go into the port of like St. Petersburg and Murmansk. Only in Sevastopol can they access the Black Sea and Mediterranean. So that is why Sevastopol is strategically very important for the Russian army and Russian defenses. Similarly, transport, it gives all-weather ports. As I told you, Sevastopol is an all-weather port. It does not freeze in winters, unlike the other Russian ports, and this gives transport opportunities to the entire Russian industry. One important reason is the encircling of of Russia by NATO and EU. See, after the breakup of USSR in 1991, many countries like Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, which were earlier part of USSR, are now part of EU as well as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And when they become part of NATO, they have NATO soldiers, they have US soldiers on their soil, they have US missiles on their soil, which is a threat to Russia. It perceives that it is a threat to Russia. Turkey is also a member of a very close strategic ally of US and a member of NATO, and that also has Turkey also has missiles which are there against Russia, which can be used against Russia. So if Ukraine would have come under the influence of EU and NATO, it would have been very much bad for Russia, because Ukraine is right at the border of Russia and it is a very big country. So Russia could not afford that, and that is why it took a proactive step, took a proactive step, and they annexed Crimea, which gave a huge signal to the world that Russia cannot be meddled with. You cannot do as you want with Russia, and we will protect our defense security with whatever resources we have, and we will not let you come to our borders. So this was a very important message to NATO, the European Union, and especially the USA. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you understood the Crimean crisis and the Russian mindset which has led to all this happenings in Crimea. And if you have any doubts, you can put them in the comment section. I will try my best to answer them. You can also suggest topics for me to make videos on, and you can leave your feedback as well. Thank you.